Hello and welcome to this week's session on another exam topic for the PMI ACP and PMP exam. In this session, we will cover two key terms: empiricism and lean thinking. Now, those of you who are familiar with a Scrum framework or have been part of any Scrum team before, you probably might have heard about these two terms before. These are the two terms which are like a foundation of the Scrum framework as per the Scrum guide, and we will explore how an Agile or a Scrum team can make use of the principles behind empiricism and lean thinking in a Scrum or an Agile project environment to effectively do the project management. My name is Ashutosh, and I am PMI PMP and PMI ACP certified professional with more than 16 years of experience in software development and project management in general. I have developed practice test or mock test for these two exam certifications, PMI PMP and PMI ACP, on the Udemy platform. So in case if you are planning to prepare for any of these certifications, you may want to check out these practice tests which are now used by thousands of certification aspirants. I will add the link to them in the video description below. Let's start first by understanding the meaning behind these two terms. The empiricism basically asserts that the knowledge comes from experience. So as a project team, right, you gain the knowledge by doing the things. That is what empiricism is all about. One more key concept behind empiricism is, as a project team or as a project professional, the decision that you make while executing the project, those decisions should be based on the real observation on the project, and we will see some of the examples of that in our upcoming slides. Lean thinking is all about reducing waste. In other words, we can say that lean thinking emphasizes focusing on only doing the essential things, and hence there is a lot of focus on reducing or eliminating the waste, thereby increasing the overall productivity of the project team. Scrum, which is one of the most popular agile framework, is actually founded on the principle of empiricism and lean thinking. As you might know, Scrum employs an iterative and an incremental approach to optimize the predictability and to control the risk. Scrum usually engages groups of people who collectively have all the skills and expertise to complete the project work. This kind of a team, which consists of all the skills and expertise which is needed to complete the project work, can be termed as a cross functional team, and these kind of cross functional teams are quite common in Scrum. So this Scrum framework is built on three fundamental pillars of the transparency, the inspection, and adaptation. In the coming slides, right, we will see how the Scrum team can apply various approaches or various ways to implement the principle of empiricism and a lean thinking. So we will start with the principle of empiricism first in our next slide. uh, so let's start with the principle of empiricism and how a typical project Scrum team can implement the fact that the knowledge comes from experience, and how the project team should make the project decisions based on the real observations and evidences on the project. Let's consider a sprint planning event, for example. Okay, so as you might know, right, during the sprint planning, typically the Scrum team selects the product backlog items or PBIs. These product backlog items are typically consist of user stories, right? So these user stories are selected from the product backlog for the upcoming sprint. But the question here is, how many stories should the Scrum team must select? What should be the criteria for selecting the right number of stories for the upcoming sprint? So instead of selecting the stories just by gut feeling or by means of an educated guess, the Scrum team can actually apply the principle of empiricism in this case. The Scrum team can leverage their past experience, their past observations, and learn from it and apply those learnings and observations to make the decision about how many stories they should be selecting for the upcoming sprint. But how can the Scrum team can do it? Well, the answer is by using a term called team velocity. So, team velocity refers to the measure of the amount of work a Scrum team can complete in a single sprint, right? So, let's say in the last sprint, if the Scrum team has completed 30 story points, then this number 30 represents the velocity of that team in the last sprint. So, every previously concluded sprint will have a team velocity associated. This team velocity, which is the measure of the amount of work a Scrum team is completing in a single sprint, can be a useful metrics. If on average in the last 5 sprints the team is completing say nearly 45 story points, then it is a good indication that for the upcoming sprint the Scrum team can select the user stories whose story points are near to the average team velocity, in this case 45, and this is based from the past few sprints. So, in this way, as you can see, right, the Scrum team is planning their work which is based on the past experience and their observation about how much in the past they are able to achieve during the sprint duration. So this kind of approach is far better than using just the gut feeling or going by gut feeling, or taking just an educated guess, because this approach is backed by the data, it is backed by the real evidences from the past. So the team velocity trend that we discussed is the real data, real evidence of how much work the team is consistently completing over a period of last few sprints. Another example of empiricism can be that during the sprint, which is let's say a 2 week long, the team found out that due to some technical challenge which they are facing, they may fall behind and will not be able to complete all the stories which are committed by the Scrum team at the time of sprint planning. Now, how do the project team will know that they are behind? Is there any tool? Well, yes, there is a tool called burn down chart. Again, very common in a Scrum project. This burn down chart is a visual representation of the work which is remaining in a sprint. Typically, this burn down chart is created at the beginning of the sprint and it is updated daily, uh, again, typically in a daily Scrum meeting. It's a two axis chart. The y axis of the burn down chart represents the amount of work remaining, which can be expressed in terms of story points, and the x axis, which represents the time which is remaining in the sprint, right? So it's a bi-directional, it's a bi-axis chart. Each day during the sprint, the Scrum team updates this burn down chart by plotting the amount of work remaining based on the work completed and any new work that might be identified by the team. This provides a real time visual of how the sprint is progressing so far. Again, in this case, the takeaway is the team is constantly observing the updates in a burn down chart, and based on those observations, the team is tracking the progress, and in this case they can make a data driven decision during the sprint. So if the team finds that they are lagging behind, then maybe the team decides to collaborate, they can work together and come up with a common solution. One more example of empiricism is, let's say during one of the retrospective meeting, the team member found that the estimations which they are providing, they are not accurate enough and those estimations can be improved further. Now this is an observation which is made by the team, right, during the sprint, and based on that observation the project team can learn and adapt the better ways of doing an estimation for all the future sprints. Again, the point here is the project team is learning from their past experiences as well as keeping an eye on projects' metrics, and then constantly doing the observation on important data. And based on the past experience and observation, the Scrum team is making appropriate decisions to improve the overall project performance. So I think that's the main point about the empiricism, that you learn from your past experiences and you keep an focus and observe the various project metrics constantly throughout the life cycle of the project. Moving on, we will be covering about the lean thinking in the next slide. So in case of lean thinking, the Scrum team will be focusing on only the essential work items and activities and focus on eliminating any wasteful activities. I have called out few examples in this slide here regarding the lean thinking. You might have heard about a term called work in progress, or WIP for short. WIP refers to the number of tasks or the user stories that a Scrum team has actively started but not yet fully completed within a given time frame, such as a sprint or an iteration. Work in progress represents the amount of work that is currently being worked on but it is not yet delivered or considered as done. While the work in progress or WIP itself is not inherently bad, having an excessive items or work in progress can lead to several challenges and negative consequences in a Scrum environment or in an Agile project. Having too much of work in progress can lead to reduced team focus and attention on each individual task or user story. So, in order to avoid too much of work in progress, the Scrum team can set an upper limit on the maximum number of user stories or tasks that can be in progress simultaneously. And in this way, the Scrum team can limit the work in progress and all the negative effects emerging out of it. This is an example of a Scrum team eliminating the waste and applying the lean thinking. One more example of applying lean thinking can be to identify bottlenecks. In the context of a Scrum team or an Agile development, a bottleneck refers to a point in the workflow or a process where work items accumulate or slows down, causing a delay in the overall progress of the project. It's a constraint or a limiting factor that restricts the flow of work and can lead to inefficiencies and delays in delivering a value to the end users or to the customers. Again, this is a harmful situation from a project's point of view because the work item passing through the bottleneck are processed slowly or more slowly than compared to the other parts in the workflow, and as a result the overall progress of the project will be limited by the speed of the bottleneck. Now, to overcome this, the Scrum team can use a Scrum board to track the progress of the user stories and to identify the bottlenecks and visualize the flow of work. One more example of eliminating the waste can be that the project team members during the retro calling out the non-essential meetings and discussions, and that they will not be attending it because these meetings or discussions are not related to the project deliverables, and the presence of the team members in such meetings does not add any value to the project or to the team members themselves. They may want to skip this. It is in the best interest for the project and for the team member to avoid such meetings which don't add any value, right? Which are like non-essential. Again, the lean thinking is in play here. Okay, so these are some of the examples of lean thinking in a typical Scrum environment. I hope the information which is shared in this session was helpful for you to understand the principle of empiricism and lean thinking and how a Scrum team can apply these using various ways. So, if you find this session useful, please give it a like and consider subscribing to this channel. I am planning to add more videos related to the PMI ACP and PMI PMP certification related topics in future. So, if you have any specific topics which you want more information around, do let me know and I will try to make a video on that. If you have any questions or feedback or comments, please feel free to reach out, and I thank you for watching.